My name is Iago Villafurt. Today I am 30 years old, but the story I'm going to tell happened when I was only 17. At that age, when the world seems to be opening up before you, I was forced to look at it in a completely different way. It was an episode that redefined my life, my view on existence, on time, on the fragility of each breath. Ever since I can remember, I have had a companion that no one would choose: asthma. She was like a constant shadow, always nearby, infiltrating every moment, the happy ones and the difficult ones. It was as if I had been born with a brick in my chest, an invisible weight that reminded me, all the time, that I couldn't run like the others, laugh too much, get too emotional, or even breathe freely. I grew up in Miami, in a vibrant, loving Latino household. My family was always my rock. My mom, Esperanza, was like a full-time guardian angel. She had an almost supernatural instinct. She seemed to know something was wrong with me before I even knew it. My dad was there too, of course, but my mom, she was the front line. I guess that's what moms do, right? They feel your pain before you do. My life was, as far as it could be, normal. I went to school, I had friends, I laughed, I made plans, just like any other teenager. But there was always that quiet fear lurking in the back of my mind. The fear of being attacked in public, of choking in front of others, of not being able to ask for help, of just dying. And yes, it's strange to think about death at 17. But when you're living with a condition that can take your life in seconds, that thought is never that far away. My routine was regimented. Inhalers in every pocket, medications on a timed schedule, regular visits to the hospital. I knew Dr. Manuel Alvarez better than I knew some teachers. He had taken care of me since I was a child, always with that calm, almost fatherly manner. He would often tell me that I was strong, a warrior. Sometimes I believed him, other times, not so much. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened that morning. It was supposed to be a normal day. I woke up like any other school day, still groggy from sleep, trying to get up. But as soon as I opened my eyes, I realized something was wrong, very wrong. The air just wouldn't come. It was like my lungs had turned to stone, like an invisible weight was crushing my chest. I tried to sit up, to reach for the nightstand where my inhaler always sat, but my movements were strangely slow, as if I were sinking into quicksand. The despair began to grow fast, like a fire. I wanted to scream, to call for my mother, but my voice wouldn't come out. Only a hoarse, muffled sound escaped my throat. It was in that moment, in that look at the ceiling of my room that seemed to be spinning, that I understood. This was no ordinary attack. This was something else, something bigger, something worse. And it was there, amidst the panic and the silence, that the most frightening and most transformative journey of my life began. Time seemed to slow down. Each second lasted an eternity. I could hear my heart beating loudly, out of rhythm, as if it were about to explode inside my ears. The room began to lose its colors. Everything around me turned into a blurry painting, as if reality was leaking out of the edges. I don't know how much time passed before my mother noticed. Maybe seconds, maybe minutes. But for me, it was an eternity made of anguish. When she walked into the room, I remember seeing terror on her face. My mother, who always seemed to know what to do, was terrified. It was the first time I had seen that. And that's when it hit me. If even she couldn't hide her fear, it must be because this was really serious. She came running to me, spoke to me, but the words seemed to float away, far away. I felt her arms around me, helping me up. With a strength I never imagined in her, she carried me out of the room. We ran down the stairs as if we were running from a fire. She put me in the car and sped off. The trip to the hospital was like walking through a bad dream. The lights of Miami passed by in blurred trails. I saw everything, but as if I were underwater. The horns, the headlights, the sirens in the distance. Everything mixed with my mother's voice, which insisted, "Stay with me, son, hold on just a little longer." But it was so difficult. My eyes felt heavy. My body wanted to give up. And there, in that car seat, between the world of the living and the unknown, the strangest and most surprising part of my story began. Something that would defy all logic, all medical knowledge, and would change who I am forever. But before I continue, I need you to understand one thing. What I'm about to tell you may sound unbelievable. It may seem like an exaggeration, delusion, even fiction, but I swear, with every cell in my body, that it is the truth, my truth. And I hope that by sharing this with you, I can pass on some of the light that this experience has brought to my life. Because yes, In the midst of despair, there is light. We rushed to the hospital near South Beach. The bright emergency lights blinded me for a moment. Everything was white, clinical, fuzzy. I remember hands pulling me out of the car, being placed on a stretcher and being taken down corridors that seemed to spiral. Strange faces flashed by. Doctors and nurses moved as if they were dancing a rehearsed choreography around me. Amidst that chaos, between hurried voices and harsh lights, I saw a familiar face. It was Doctor. He was serious. More serious than I had ever seen him. He barely acknowledged me with a glance before he began examining me. Technical words floated in the air like fragments of a language I didn't fully understand. Low saturation, severe bronchospasm, epinephrine, fast. I could feel pins and needles in my arms, injections, needles, tubes. They were trying to save me, but it was all so fast, so intense, that it felt like the world was spinning faster than I could keep up. Dr. Alvarez spoke to me, his voice firm but gentle. He told me to try to breathe slowly. Take it easy, Iago. Just breathe. It will pass. But how can you breathe slowly when you feel like you are drowning inside your own body? A mask was pressed against my face and the air forced into my lungs hurt, as if they were cracking from the inside. Still, it was like a ray of light in a dark room. For a few seconds, I felt relief. I wanted to speak. I wanted to say that I was scared, that I didn't want to die, that there was still so much I hadn't experienced. But my mouth wouldn't obey. My body was there, but it felt distant. All I could do was look at my mother. She was holding my hand so tightly that her fingers were shaking. There was despair in her eyes, but there was also love, a love that seemed to keep me anchored to life. The next few minutes were a whirlwind of sounds, movements, and machines beeping. More doctors arrived. Tests were performed right there, amid shouts and urgent orders. Dr. Alvarez never left my side. He monitored everything, like a captain trying to maintain control of a ship in the middle of a storm. Little by little, almost imperceptibly, I began to feel the effects of the medication. My breathing, although fragile, seemed less desperate. But the fear, oh, the fear was still there. Silent, warm, alive. It was then that I heard Dr. Alvarez mumble something to a nurse. Something like, "Let's let you rest a little. The worst is over." My mother leaned over and kissed my forehead, and I could feel her tears running down my face. I wanted to tell her that it was going to be okay, that she could stop crying, but my mouth was still silent. My eyelids felt heavy. It was like every blink dragged me deeper. I fought sleep with all my remaining strength, fearing that if I closed my eyes, I would never open them again. But it was useless. Exhaustion overcame me. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the kind face of a nurse leaning over me. She told me to relax, that she would be there for me, and then everything went black. But that wasn't the end. In fact, it was just the beginning. When my eyes closed in that hospital bed, I expected to fall asleep. A heavy sleep, perhaps filled with dreams or silence. And for a brief moment, that's exactly what I felt. That familiar numbness, that feeling of my body shutting down, giving in. But then suddenly, the heaviness lifted. It was as if I had become air, light, free. I was no longer lying down. I no longer felt the discomfort in my body. I opened my eyes, or at least I felt like I did, and realized that I was no longer in the hospital. It was a dark space, yes, but not threatening. There was a strange calmness there, a deep serenity. It was the kind of darkness that doesn't frighten, it just envelops. I looked down, and then the shock hit. I was there, my body, on the stretcher. Tubes were coming out of my nose, my arm. The machines were still beeping, the doctors were still fighting. And my mother, she was still holding my hand, now with her face pressed against the sheet, praying softly with a choked voice. My first impulse was to scream, to say, "Mom, I'm here, I'm okay." But no sound came out. I tried to get closer, but it was as if there was an invisible wall between us, a barrier made of something I couldn't name. I could see it, hear it, feel it, but I couldn't touch it. And for the first time in years, I felt no pain. There was no tightness in my chest. There was no fear. It was as if a huge weight had finally been lifted off me. For the first time, I was at peace. As I watched from above, I began to sense something even stranger. It was as if I could sense the emotions of everyone there. My mother's deep fear, Dr. Alvarez's urgency and concentration, the nurse's anxiety. It was as if everything was connected, and I could feel every strand of that connection. The scene began to slowly fade away, as if reality was dissolving, melting into thin air. I was disoriented for a second, and then, in the blink of an eye, I found myself in a completely different place. It was the kitchen in my house, but not the one now. It was the kitchen from many years ago when I was a child. The same worn wooden table, the flowery curtains, the smell of freshly made pancakes in the air, and there, with her back to me, was my abuela Camila. My heart stopped for a moment. She had passed away when I was only 10 years old, and yet, there she was, alive, real, stirring the pancake batter like she did every Sunday morning, softly singing a Spanish song I hadn't heard in years but that my memory recognized immediately. A wave of emotion washed over me completely. It was as if all the pain, fears, and doubts in my life were suddenly washed away by that simple moment. Grandma was there, and that was just the beginning. I tried calling out to her, "Grandmother." I whispered with all the strength I had, but no sound came out of my mouth. Nothing. It was like I had no vocal cords left, like the sound simply didn't exist there. I walked closer, feeling an intense mix of hope and confusion, and reached out toward her. But when I touched her shoulder, my hand went right through, like I was made of air, like I was a ghost. It was at this moment that panic began to take shape. My head was spinning. What was happening to me? Was I dead? Was that a dream? A hallucination? Before I could even begin to process it all, the smell of pancakes, the warmth of the kitchen, the figure of my grandmother, it all began to fade away like smoke in the wind. A second later, I was surrounded by darkness again. But this time I wasn't completely alone. All around me I felt presences. I can't call them people, because they had no form. There was no face, no body, no voice. They were more like essences, silhouettes made of energy, floating, hovering in that dark space. And yet each one exuded emotions: confusion, sadness, disorientation. Everyone there seemed as lost as I was. I tried to communicate. I tried to reach out to one of these presences to seek some kind of connection, some kind of explanation, but it was as if we were all trapped in invisible bubbles, isolated in our own existence. I could feel the others. He knew they were there, but he couldn't touch them. I couldn't hear them, and even they couldn't hear me. It was in this silent void between despair and impotence that something caught my attention. In the distance, very far away, there was a point of light. At first, it was so small that I almost doubted its existence. Maybe it was just a reflection of my mind trying to give me hope. But the more I looked, the more that light grew, gaining shape, intensity, presence. It was as if, within that dark immensity, there was a beacon calling me silently. Not with words, not with sounds, but with something much deeper, a certainty, a call. I needed to go there. I didn't know why. No way. But every fiber of my being told me that light was the answer. And then I left it all behind. The darkness, the confusing presences, even the fear, all were left behind as I began my journey toward the light. But what does it mean to move in a place where there is no ground, no direction? I didn't walk. It didn't fly either. It was like being gently pulled, like a piece of metal being attracted by an invisible magnet. The light seemed to call me and lead me at the same time. And as I got closer, it grew larger, but not in a threatening way. On the contrary, that light, it was the most tender embrace I had ever felt without arms. It was the warmth of the winter sun on my face. It was safety. It was love. And when I finally reached her, it was like diving into an ocean of peace. There, surrounded by light, everything changed. All the fears, all the doubts, all the pain in my life disappeared. It was as if I had taken off a heavy coat that I had been carrying since birth, without ever realizing how much it was suffocating me. At that moment, I felt whole, complete. Nothing was missing. I was me. But at the same time, it was more. It was like I could feel all: the pain and joy of the world, the beauty of living, the sadness of those who leave, the strength of those who stay. And then I realized I wasn't alone there. I didn't see a figure per se. There was no face, no body, no voice, but there was a clear presence, a warm awareness that radiated an ancient, quiet, profound wisdom. I didn't feel afraid of it. On the contrary, I felt as if I were standing before someone who knew me better than I knew myself. This presence presented itself as my mentor, but not with spoken words. It was as if the understanding simply arose within my mind, like a memory that had always been there. She welcomed me with a tenderness that is difficult to explain, and with unparalleled delicacy, she began to guide me. What came next was like a journey into my own life, but not like watching a movie. It was more vivid than that. I revived every moment. I felt the emotions again, with full intensity. I saw scenes from my childhood that my conscious memory had already left behind. I saw my father's eyes shining when I learned to ride a bike. I felt my mother's hand holding mine on the first day of school. I heard myself laughing with my cousin in the backyard, chasing a kite. But I also saw the dark moments, the times I was selfish. When you lie, when I hurt people unintentionally, or even with her. The difference is that there was no judgment, just understanding. My mentor showed me everything with infinite patience, and as I watched each of these moments, she made me understand something greater, that every action, every word, even every thought, generates a wave, a vibration, and these waves spread, touching things, people, lives, in ways we can't even imagine. I saw the day I defended a classmate at school, a boy who was being bullied and who I, almost without thinking, protected. For me, at the time, it was just a moment, an almost automatic attitude. But there, with my soul's eyes open, I could see the impact it had on his life and on other lives around him. It was like watching a stone fall into a lake and watching the ripples expand forever. The mentor showed me this with love, not to judge me, but to teach me. It was then that I understood. This experience, as surreal as it was, had a purpose, and I had not yet completed my journey. During that entire process of reviewing my life, I felt something I had never experienced with such clarity, an unconditional love coming from my mentor. It was a love that did not waver, did not judge, did not expect anything in return. No matter what I had done, whether it was good deeds or mistakes that I carried as scars on my soul, this love remained constant, firm, like the light of a lighthouse in the middle of a storm. And it was then that something profound began to change within me. Little by little, I began to feel that same love for myself, a true love, devoid of shame, guilt, or demands. And almost magically, that feeling expanded, first to myself, then to everyone around me. Every person I had ever crossed paths with, every stranger who had passed me by without even knowing my name, they were all in some way connected to me. It was as if, for the first time, I could see the invisible web that connects us all. I saw clearly, life is not about chasing material things. It is not about accumulating awards, possessions, or recognition. Life is about growing. It is about learning. It is about loving. It is about the connections we make and the positive impact we leave on the world. And this silent, simple, and immense truth, took root in me like a new root. When the review was over, I felt as if I had been remade. Not just renewed, transformed. It was as if someone had cleaned a dusty lens I hadn't even realized I was using, and now everything seemed sharper, more alive, more true. But my journey was not over yet. My mentor, with the same serenity as always, made me understand that there was more, that I still needed to see, feel, and understand things that would challenge everything I thought I knew, about the world, about myself, about time itself. And then, before us, something impressive appeared, an immense screen made of pure energy. It was not exactly a screen, as we know it, but a living, pulsating surface, as if the very fabric of the universe had been folded to create a projection space. It was beautiful, intense, and vibrated with an energy that I felt in every atom of my being. It was on this cosmic screen that images began to emerge, visions of what seemed to be my future. At first, they were just fragments, hazy images, like dreams you try to remember when you wake up. But gradually, certain scenes began to come into focus. I saw myself, older, living in a house I didn't recognize, a simple house, but full of warmth. I was surrounded by a family, a woman with a familiar face though I couldn't quite place her, and two small children running around the garden, laughing with pure joy. The scene was full of love and contentment. Then came visions of a career. I was involved in something meaningful, something that seemed to combine my passion with purpose. I couldn't place or title, but the emotion was clear. I felt useful, fulfilled, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, but not everything was easy. I also saw the obstacles, the moments of doubt, the days of fear. I saw that my asthma would still be a part of my life, but no longer as an enemy. It now appeared as a silent companion, a patient teacher, who would teach me about limits, courage, and acceptance. It was as if the disease had stopped being a prison and had become a bridge to something greater. These visions shook me deeply. There was hope, of course, and joy, but there was also a chill in my stomach, a gentle anxiety for all that was yet to come. It was the recognition that even with light on the path, the road would require strength. And then, everything changed. The screen began to vibrate at a different frequency. The images of my personal life began to dissolve, giving way to something that seemed infinitely larger. It was then that I saw it. September 2025. At first I didn't understand, but soon the scene took shape, and what I witnessed left me speechless. From the sky, a legion of luminous beings descended in absolute silence. They were tall, powerful, and radiated a light so pure that it seemed to pierce through everything, even me. They had wings of shimmering energy, and each beat of them seemed to create ripples that echoed across the canvas of the universe. They were angels, not in the traditional religious sense, but in their highest essence, guardians of the light. On the other side, the contrast. Shadows appeared, creatures made of living darkness like smoke with intentions. They crept across the world like a silent mist, infiltrating cities, homes, hearts. There were many of them, and they hungered for chaos. Light and darkness were about to collide, and somehow this battle was not just symbolic, it was real. Something was about to happen. Something cosmic, yes, but which would manifest itself here, on Earth. I felt the weight of the moment. My mentor, noticing my astonishment, approached me with her welcoming presence and explained to me, once again without words, but with absolute clarity, this battle would be decisive for humanity, a turning point for the ages, and the most frightening, and at the same time inspiring thing was that the outcome would depend on us, on the choices each person would make, on how we would act when faced with fear, with hatred, with the temptation to turn a blind eye and pretend it wasn't our responsibility. She said, "Light or darkness will grow depending on which is fed by our actions." I remained silent. How could I, an ordinary boy with an ordinary life, who could barely control his own breathing, have any role in something so grand? And then she answered, without sound, without language, only with truth. "You are not small. No human being is. Every act of kindness, every choice of love over fear, is a flame lit in the darkness." And in that moment I understood, but my mentor assured me with tenderness and firmness. Each of us has an important role to play, even if, at first glance, that role seems small or unimportant. We may not always be able to see the immediate impact of our actions, but that does not mean they are in vain. Some seeds bloom in silence, out of sight, but transform entire landscapes over time. As that colossal vision finally began to dissipate, I felt an almost physical internal shift. I was no longer just Iago, the asthmatic kid from Miami who grew up surrounded by medicine, care, and fear. I was now part of something infinitely greater, a conscious, awake participant in a cosmic drama unfolding far beyond the confines of Earth and time. And in that moment, I understood. I had come back to life for a reason, a mission, something that went far beyond my own existence. The awareness of this mission frightened me. It was, after all, an immense responsibility. How could someone as ordinary as me carry such a burden? But at the same time, something new was being born within me, a silent strength, an almost wild desire to fulfill this purpose, a spark of determination that grew like fire in dry wood. I looked at my mentor, this presence that was pure love, calm wisdom, with eyes full of questions. I needed to understand more, to understand what it all meant. For me, for the world, for life itself. Noticing my restless mind, my mentor led me with immense delicacy to a new space. It was a garden, but not a garden like those on Earth. There were no flowers with petals, nor trees with leaves. It was more like a field of living, pulsating energy that emanated the same serenity we feel when walking barefoot on wet grass, or listening to the sound of the wind through the trees. There, everything vibrated in perfect harmony, like a silent song made of peace. Existence itself seemed to breathe in that place. It was in this ethereal garden that my mentor began to explain to me, with that wordless communication, mind to mind, heart to heart. "Iago," she said, and I felt the name vibrate within me like a summons. "What you have seen is only a fraction of the grand plan of the universe. The battle you have witnessed is a symbolic and energetic manifestation of an eternal conflict, the tension between light and darkness, between love and fear. This struggle does not only take place in the heavens, it takes place within every human being, every day. She explained that the angels I saw were not winged figures like in paintings, but pure representations of loving energy, positive intention, and active compassion. Likewise, the shadows represented fear, doubt, and selfishness, forces that feed on what is unresolved within us. Then I asked, "But why? Why, EU?" My mentor did not respond with cold logic, but with the tenderness of someone who knows every part of you. And although I did not see a smile I or you feel, a wave of deep welcome ran through my being. "Iago," she told me, "every soul has a unique role in the great fabric of existence. Nothing you have experienced has been by chance. Your asthma, painful as it has been, has shaped something rare in you. Sensitivity, compassion, quiet courage. You see where others do not. You feel what many do not. This is a gift, and it will be essential for what lies ahead." She then revealed that my near-death experience was not just an accident or a scare from life. It was a call, an opportunity to see beyond the veil of everyday life, a chance to understand the invisible. "You will return with knowledge that few possess," she said. "But with that knowledge comes a responsibility." In the next few moments, she began to teach me, as a patient master teaches an eager learner. He spoke about the nature of reality, about how our thoughts, words, and intentions shape not only our own lives, but the very fabric of the universe. He showed me that every act of kindness, every loving thought, every choice made from the heart, strengthens the forces of light, and likewise every selfish action, every thought poisoned by fear, anger, or pride, feeds the darkness. "The battle I saw," she explained, "will not be fought with swords, tanks, or bombs. It will be fought with choices, with gestures, with daily actions taken by ordinary people like me, like you, like all of us." And then, once again, she showed me something extraordinary. The future was not fixed. Those images I saw, of spiritual warfare, of chaos, of hope, were just possibilities, cosmic sketches. The pen was still in our hands. The outcome would depend on each of us. She spoke to me about balance, about how light and dark are part of the same dance. Without night, we cannot appreciate the day. Without challenges, there is no growth. And then she pointed at me, not with a finger but with her presence, and reminded me, even my asthma, that condition I hated so much, that so often brought me pain, prepared me for compassion, for listening, for understanding the value of breathing, that simple miracle that so many take for granted. There, in that garden of energy, I understood that nothing is small, no choice is irrelevant. A simple good morning can change someone's day. A compassionate gesture can break a chain of pain. A pure thought can uplift not only you but everyone around you. And then my mentor, with the serenity of 1,000 suns, looked at me, or rather, turned to me, and said with firm sweetness, "Your role, Iago, will be that of a lighthouse. You will return with knowledge that few possess," my mentor said, her voice vibrating like a warm summer breeze through my chest. "And your task will be to share that light with the world." She didn't use grandiose speeches or theatrical gestures. None of that. Her message was simple, powerful, and disarming. I should pass on what I had learned through small acts of kindness, through sincere compassion, through true listening, through love applied to everyday life. Revolution, she showed me, begins with the most humble gesture. As those words sank deep into my being, I felt something shift inside me, as if a forgotten gear had started turning again, as if a long extinguished light had been turned on again, illuminating parts of my soul I hadn't even known existed. I wasn't the same anymore. I wasn't just Iago, the boy from Miami who had always lived in the shadow of asthma. Now I understood. I was part of something much bigger, something cosmic, something eternal, and I was ready. I felt it not in my thoughts, but in the center of my chest. "I'm ready," I said, without making a sound. But my mentor understood. Of course she understood. She always understood. And then she smiled. Not with her lips. She didn't need that. It was a smile of energy, of presence, a smile that enveloped me completely, like a warm blanket on a stormy night. I felt her love pass through me like warm light passes through colored glass, painting my soul with serenity and courage. "Remember," she said, "you are never alone. Even when you return, even when the memory of this experience begins to fade, we will be with you. It was at that moment that I felt my surroundings change. Before, everything was light, warmth, and a diffuse peace. But now, this light began to focus on a point in front of me, a column of pure energy that seemed to pulse alive like a heart beating in the void of the cosmos. Little by little, this beam of light took shape, and then, before me, appeared what I can only describe as a portal. It was like looking into a sun, but without the pain in your eyes. There was a silent invitation there, an irresistible call, and along with it, a choice. My mentor, always by my side, turned to me once again. "Iago," she communicated, not with words but with pure thought. "You now face a sacred decision." The portal, she explained, represented the continuation of my spiritual journey. If I chose to pass through it, I would leave behind my earthly existence. There would be no more physical body, no more pain, no more disease. I would continue to evolve, yes, but on other planes, far from the limitations and joys of earth. The temptation was real. There, on that plane, I felt whole, without pain, without fear, without the weight of compressed lungs, of emergency sirens, of my parents' distressed looks. There was only love, stillness, and belonging. It seemed so easy. But as if my mentor could hear even the quietest echo of my doubt, she showed me another vision, and this one hurt. I saw my mother, Hope, sitting next to my body in the hospital, holding my hand as if her life depended on it. I saw the tears streaming down her tired face, the despair in her eyes. I saw my father standing near the door, his fists clenched and his jaw clenched, trying to be strong but falling apart inside. I saw my friends, my uncles, my cousins. I saw love, I saw pain, and I understood. With a clarity that cut like crystal, my life still had purpose. "Every lifetime is precious," my mentor said, "and every experience, no matter how difficult, is a rare opportunity for growth. If you return, you will face challenges, yes, but you will also have the chance to make a difference, to be the light the world so desperately needs." It was then that the pieces fell into place. I remembered the vision of the cosmic battle. I remembered the importance of each choice. I remembered the message I was supposed to carry, and I understood deeply. This was not just a choice between life and death. It was a choice between personal comfort and collective responsibility. Going back meant giving up absolute peace, but in exchange, gaining the chance to change lives, including mine. I looked at the portal, which was beating like a divine heart, and then I looked back. I saw my body. I saw my mother. I saw the world. With a heavy heart, but filled with a new strength I could barely name, I made my choice. "I want to go back," I communicated with all my being. "There is so much work to be done, so many people to touch, so many seeds to plant. It is not my time yet." My mentor enveloped me in one last wave of love. It was like a hug from the universe. "You are brave, Iago, and you will never be alone. Remember, life is the greatest gift, and every breath, every second, is a chance to spread light." She warned me tenderly that the return would not be easy. My body had been deeply traumatized. I would feel pain, and perhaps the memories of that experience would fade, like a dream that disappears upon awakening. But what I had learned, what had taken root in my innermost being, would remain. And so, with my soul at peace, with my heart full of purpose, I began to feel reality change. The light around me intensified, then began to dissolve. A familiar sound, the beprhythmic sound of hospital machines, began to play again little by little, like a forgotten song. My body, heavy, my lungs, burning, my vision, blurred, but I was back, and the journey now was just beginning. "Iago, whenever you feel alone, remember, we will be here, in charge even when you cannot see or hear us." These words echoed inside me like a beacon, as I felt my body being pulled back, as if I were fighting against a strong and relentless current. Each movement required enormous effort, like swimming in turbulent waters that did not want to let me go. The light that had previously enveloped me, soft and warm, began to dim little by little, and I found myself being sucked back into the darkness. But this time, the darkness didn't scare me. It was no longer a place of fear, but rather a gateway to something greater. I knew deep down that I was returning to fulfill a purpose that transcended everything I had ever experienced. It was as if love and determination had lit a flame within me, a silent force that drove me forward. I accepted the call, surrendered myself to the journey back to my life, prepared to face the challenges that awaited me, and to be the light that the world needed. The process of returning to my body was something that no words can properly explain. It was like going through layers and layers of different realities, each one denser, heavier than the last. The light that had previously embraced me completely faded until I was plunged into total, almost absolute darkness. For a moment I felt panic tighten my chest. Where was I? What was happening? But then my mentor's words came to mind, like a safe haven. You are never alone. It was with this thought that I clung, like a castaway to a piece of wood in the middle of a rough sea. Suddenly, I started feeling again. But it wasn't that light, almost floating feeling of the world of light. It was physical, intense, and uncomfortable. A sharp pain in my chest that reminded me of my struggle with asthma, a biting cold that seemed to seep into my bones, and an enormous heaviness, as if every cell in my body was fighting gravity to move. Slowly, very slowly, I began to hear sounds around me. At first, they were just indistinct noises, as if I were submerged inside a watery cocoon. But the sounds grew clearer, the constant beeping of machines, the low whisper of worried voices, the shuffling sound of footsteps on the cold linoleum floor. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt like lead. I tried to move a finger, an arm, anything, but my body wouldn't respond. I was trapped in that moment between two worlds. Then I heard a voice, clear and familiar, full of love and concern. Iago, my son, can you hear me? It was the voice of my mother, Esperanza. So much emotion in her, so much pain and hope mixed together. My mother was there, holding my hand, speaking softly to me to calm me down. She told me that I was okay, that I was starting to wake up, that it might take a while, but that it was a sign that I was fighting to get back. Little by little, flashes of my life passed through my mind, images of moments I had lived, of profound lessons. I tried to hold on to each thought, as if I were holding on to the last leaves of a tree before they fell. I don't know how long I remained in this semi-conscious state, perhaps minutes, perhaps hours, or even days. Time seemed to not exist in there, but slowly, I began to feel a gentle control returning to my body. First, a slight movement of the fingers, then the feeling of my lips moving, even though no words came out. And after an eternity, my eyes opened. The light in the hospital room blinded me for a moment, and I blinked several times until I could focus. And then there she was, my mother, her eyes red and swollen from crying so much, but with a smile that lit up everything around her. Iago, she exclaimed, holding my hand so tightly that it seemed like she never wanted to let go. Thank God you're back. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and sore. Only a hoarse sound came out of my mouth. It was Dr. Alvarez, who was on the other side of the bed, who quickly offered me a glass of water and a straw. After a few sips, I finally managed to say, my voice weak but firm, Mom, I'm back. I chose to come back. There was confusion in her eyes, but also immense love and deep relief. Dr. Alvarez began asking questions, checking my vital signs, but it all seemed distant, as if it were happening outside my body. Lying in that hospital bed, weak and aching, I felt something new, more alive than ever. I knew with certainty that my true journey was just beginning. I had returned with a purpose, carrying precious knowledge and a mission that was now mine to fulfill, and nothing would stop me from being the light the world so desperately needed. I looked out my bedroom window and saw the bright blue Miami sky. Outside, the world looked exactly the same. The sun lit the streets, the wind rustled the leaves in the trees, and the distant sound of cars filled the air. But inside me, something had changed forever. I was no longer the same. There was something deep and quiet that now resided in my chest, a mixture of love, wisdom, and renewed determination. I was ready to face whatever came, armed with the light and learning I had brought from the other side. The days that followed my awakening in the hospital were like a roller coaster of emotions and challenges. My body, although alive, was exhausted, sore, and fragile. The doctors explained that what I had been through was a traumatic experience and that recovery would take time for my body to recover and for my mind to find balance as well. My asthma, which had been a constant specter, finally seemed under control, thanks to the intensive care I received. But even then, I knew the real challenge wasn't physical. It was something much more complex inside me. How could I explain to people what I had experienced? How can I tell about the light, the mentor, and the lessons I learned on the other side? And perhaps the most difficult, how to incorporate all of this into my routine, into my everyday life. At first I was eager to share everything. I spoke to my parents, to Dr. Alvarez, to the nurses. I told them all about the light that surrounded me, about the voice of my mentor who guided me, about the lessons I had learned in that other dimension. Some people listened to me with fascination, their eyes shining with curiosity, while others were skeptical and somewhat distant. Dr. Alvarez, in particular, showed great interest, asked detailed questions, and took careful notes. My mother, Esperanza, watched everything with a mixture of wonder and concern. One day, holding my hand, she said to me in a soft voice, "Son, it doesn't matter what you saw or felt there. What really matters is that you are here with us now." As the days went on, I began to realize that not everyone was ready or willing to hear my story. Some friends who came to visit seemed uncomfortable when I brought it up, quickly turning the conversation to school or what I had missed while I was hospitalized. Little by little, I learned to choose carefully what to tell, to whom, and when. I realized that the real lesson was not in making everyone listen, but in living what I had learned, letting my actions speak for me. Adapting to normal life was a challenge in itself. Things that had once seemed crucial, grades in school, fashionable clothes, petty arguments, now felt empty and irrelevant in the face of the grandeur of my experience. At the same time, simple details began to take on new meaning. The sincere smile of a stranger, the soft song of birds in the morning, the unexpected kindness of a gesture. Everything seemed charged with beauty and meaning. My relationship with asthma changed too. Before, I had seen it as an enemy, something to fight and hate. Now, while it was still an obstacle, I saw it as part of my journey, a constant lesson in compassion and resilience, a reminder that the body has its weaknesses, but the spirit can grow stronger. One of the biggest changes, however, was in the way I related to others. I remembered my mentor's words about the interconnectedness of everything, how each life is connected to another, in invisible and profound ways. I began to practice more empathy, trying to see beyond appearances, seeking to understand the struggles that each person was silently facing. At school, I realized that I was more patient, more willing to help classmates who were struggling, more open to listening and supporting. I got involved in volunteer work, feeling that each small act of kindness was a way of honoring what I had learned. But of course, not everything was easy. There were days when the responsibility for the knowledge I carried felt like a crushing weight. The vision of the future, the cosmic battle that was to come, weighed on my mind like a huge shadow. How could I, an ordinary teenager, make a difference in the face of something so grand? At times like these, doubt almost overcame me. It was during one of these crises that I remembered my mentor's words. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, strengthens the forces of light. In that moment, I understood that my mission was not to save the world alone, but to be a light in my own circle, inspiring others to do the same. As the months passed, I noticed that some of the details of my experience began to grow hazy, as if they were slipping from my memory, like a dream that disappears upon waking. The emotions and lessons remained vivid, but the exact details began to slip away. This frightened me at first, but I soon realized what really matters is not the precise details, but how I apply what I learned to my life every day. After everything I had been through, I started keeping a journal, not just to record that intense experience, but to document every step of my journey of growth and transformation. Each day brought its own challenges, its own opportunities to put into practice the lessons I had learned on the other side. And so, day after day, I was building not only a new life, but a new version of myself. I was no longer just Iago, the kid from Miami with asthma. I was someone who had glimpsed something beyond the ordinary, someone with a greater purpose, a mission to fulfill. The life I chose to return to was just beginning, and I was determined to make every moment, every breath count. Today, 13 years have passed since that morning that changed everything. 13 years since I was on the brink of death and chose to return. Looking back, I see that every day since then has been an intense journey of discovery, growth, and of course, challenges that have tested my strength and my faith. A lot has changed in that time. I graduated from high school, went to college, and began building a career. I've been in a relationship for 4 years now. With a college classmate, someone I feel in my heart of hearts is the future wife I glimpsed during my near-death experience. Life has moved on, as it does for all of us, with its twists and turns and surprises. My asthma? It's still with me, of course. I still have bad days, I still need to use an inhaler every now and then, but my relationship with it is completely different. Today, asthma is not a burden. It is not an enemy that I have to fight. It is a constant reminder of the fragility of life, of the preciousness of each breath, and of the strength we have within us to overcome the obstacles that arise along the way. The knowledge and lessons I brought from that other reality continue to shape every day of my life. I try to live with purpose, aware of the impact my words and actions have on the people around me. It's not always easy. There are times when I fall into old habits, get lost in trivial concerns, but it is in these moments that I turn to the greater vision that has been revealed to me, and it brings me back, centers me. One of the biggest challenges has been carrying the weight of knowledge about the future. The vision of that coming cosmic battle, scheduled for September 2025, never leaves my head. As the date approaches, I feel a mixture of anxiety and anticipation pulsing through me. Part of me wants to scream to the whole world, warn everyone of what's coming. But I learned with great effort that this is not the way. My role is not to spread fear or try to convince those who are not ready to listen. My role is to be a beacon, a constant light, inspiring others through my actions and the way I live my life. I have become increasingly involved in community work and causes that promote kindness, understanding, and empathy. I believe that every gesture, no matter how small, strengthens the forces of light. It is not about great heroic deeds, but about small daily actions that, when added together, make all the difference. Sometimes I wonder if everything I've seen will really happen. Have I understood everything correctly? Can my actions, and those of others like me, change the course of events? I have no clear answers to these questions. All I can do is continue to live as I've learned, trusting that I'm on the right path. One of the greatest lessons I have learned is the importance of being present, of living in the moment. Even though I know the future, I understand that I cannot get lost in it. Every interaction, every encounter, is an opportunity to spread light, to make a difference here and now. Looking to the future fills me with apprehension, of course. The magnitude of what lies ahead is daunting, but along with the fear, I carry an immense hope, the hope that humanity can come together, that we can choose the light even when the darkness seems so great. I don't know exactly what September 2025 will bring. I don't know how this cosmic battle will play out in our physical world, but I do know that I will be ready to face it, not as a lone hero, but as part of a living web of connected souls, each doing their part to light up the world. As I prepare for what lies ahead, a quote from my mentor rings true and clear: "You are never alone." This truth is not just an empty comfort. It is a profound force that I feel pulsing through every fiber of my being. Whatever challenge, obstacle, or shadow the future may bring, I know that I do not walk this journey alone. There is an invisible network of support, of light, of energy that surrounds and sustains me, even when everything seems uncertain. It is with this certainty that I continue to live, day after day, with gratitude in my heart, love overflowing in my soul, and a purpose that silently guides me. I continue to share my story, but not to convince anyone. I share it to inspire, to plant a seed of hope and courage in those who are open to listening, because not everyone is ready, and that's okay. At the same time, I keep my focus on myself, on my growth, on the constant search to be the best version of who I can be. The near-death experience I had at 17 was not an end, but the true beginning, a portal that opened me to a daily, continuous journey, full of learning, challenges, and transformations. I know the road ahead is still long. The days, months, and years ahead carry the unknown, and I can't deny that, even with all the preparation, I still feel a slight pang of anxiety. But stronger than the fear is a deep gratitude. I am grateful for this second chance I was given, for the wisdom I received, and for the opportunity to leave my mark, no matter how small it may seem. The future may be a mystery, full of uncertainty, but one thing remains as clear as sunlight. Every breath I take is a gift, a reminder of the value of life. Every moment I live is a chance to make a difference, to spread light in the darkness that sometimes insists on surrounding us. It is with this thought that I face each new dawn, with an open heart and a steady mind, ready for whatever comes. not as a lone warrior but as part of something greater, a thread in the infinite web of life, lighting the way for myself and for those who cross my path.